My name is Dave Champlin, and in this video I'm going to help us understand evolution by explaining this sentence. Evolution is both a process and a pattern. And to help us understand that sentence, I'm going to use an analogy. And the analogy I'm going to use is an example of a snake crawling through the desert sand. Before we jump into that, let me just mention that I've been a professor of molecular biology here at the University of Southern Maine, right on the coast of Maine in Portland, for almost 25 years. And I actually grew up in the Midwest in a little farming town in Minnesota. And I mention that because from, I think, that farm town work upbringing, when I talk to people about what I do for work today, I say, well, I'm a molecular biologist. And a molecular biologist studies the nuts and bolts of life. And I'm a car mechanic of life. And I think I say that because I find that working on a farm was so similar to working in a molecular biology research lab. In both settings, everything is very physical, and it's all about cause and effect relationships. It's all about matter-of-fact issues and common sense that I feel are really similar to car mechanics. And I'm hoping to bring those kind of sensible, accessible explanations to these videos. I'm trying to make videos to share the profound transformation that biology, the study of all life, has gone through in my lifetime. And I want to share it with everyone. I want to share it with folks that don't have a scientific background, and I want to share it with experts that are doing the research and the teaching on the topics that I'm going to be talking about in these videos. If you like this video, please hit the like button. I make these videos to be standalone videos, but also they're numbered in the title. And there's a series of videos that I'm making. If you're interested in that, please subscribe. So here is the explanation. So evolution is a process and a pattern. A snake crawling through the desert sands is a process and a pattern. The snake crawling, the actual physical movement of the snake's body, is the process, and it leaves marks in the sand. It leaves patterns of marks in the sand that are consistent with, for example, the direction it crawled, the size of the snake, the type of snake, and that's a pattern. Similarly, evolution is a process. We're used to thinking about that. The process is natural selection, survival of the fittest, and evolutionary change over very long periods of time. There's a pattern also, a product or pattern analogous to the snake trail. And the pattern is all life on Earth. All life on Earth, and the examples that we find in studying biology, points to an evolutionary process in history over long periods of time. Now, maybe the snake crawled through in the night, right? That's what the story of evolution is like. Evolution occurred over hundreds of millions of years, and we weren't here to see it, right? So what if the snake crawled through in the night? We didn't see it. We don't know for sure if the pattern of marks in the sand were caused by a snake crawling. Consequently, the process under the hands, whether it's the snake crawling or evolution, the process is a theory. That's why it's called the theory of evolution. On the other hand, the pattern is nothing like a theory. The pattern in both the desert sand and all life on Earth is as matter of fact as the fact that a car mechanic has to tell you about your car and what's going wrong with your car. Yep. By far, the most dramatic example of a pattern that we see in life on Earth is the DNA molecule. And that's because the DNA molecule is used in every cell in all life on Earth, on our planet, as the primary heritable molecule. It's the information we inherited from our parents, primarily. And scientists in the 1970s created methods to read the letters. So molecular biologists studied DNA in the 1940s, the 1950s, the structure of DNA discovered, 1960s more research on it and a lot of excitement, 1970 coming up with methods for reading the DNA sequence. That sequencing started slow and increased over time. Consequently, anytime we talk about the pattern of DNA sequence, we're talking about modern biological research. And there's a lot of it. Just to give you a feeling for that change in our understanding of DNA over the last 50 or 60 years, each person in the DNA we inherited from our parents, we inherited about 3 billion letters of DNA sequence from our mom and also from our dad. So 3 billion is a lot. The DNA sequence letters work in research laboratories goes like this. If we talk about the number of letters sequenced, read by scientists each decade on the entire planet, prior to the 1950s, none. Nothing like it. Then, 1950s, a few tens of letters, say, read in chemical reaction type experience. 1970s, the decade of the 1970s saw really the advent of methods for sequencing DNA. So in that decade, on the order of hundreds and then thousands of nucleotide letters read on the planet by all the scientists. Then in the 1980s, mid-1980s, companies introduced the first automated DNA sequencing instruments. And so millions of nucleotide letters of DNA were read by all the scientists on Earth in the 1980s. In the 1990s, it rose to billions of letters, like that. Early in the 21st century, 20 years ago, these companies introduced advancement in that DNA sequencing technology, and then, starting 20 years ago, the numbers went from billions up to trillions, and has gone up and up and up. The cost of using the instruments has gone down, and so now, each year, trillions and trillions of letters of DNA sequence are read. So a tremendous amount of data. And here's an example of what the data is used like. So this is using the DNA sequence information to look at what the protein would be for a human insulin protein. And then using a computer to just line up that DNA sequence for the human protein of insulin to insulin genes in other animals, dogs and cats and so forth. And what's seen when scientists use computers to make those comparisons between species is that more closely related species have more similar insulin DNA sequencing letters, sequence letters like that. Yep. And those more distant related start to have more differences in the insulin. And so there's just tremendous amounts of data that's collected and compared like that. I tell my classes that I think that the amount of DNA sequence data that points toward a process of evolution occurring over hundreds of millions of years ago, there's more evidence of that just in this tremendous amount of DNA sequence than there is evidence that the Earth is in the sky. Again, that's because every cell of all the organisms on our planet uses DNA as the primary heritable molecule, and we can collect that data very fast. 3 billion letters inherited from each of our parents, that's a lot. It used to be a lot. that data can be collected very, very rapidly now, and those comparisons made. Now, modern biologists don't limit themselves to DNA. Everything on Earth points to the process of evolution occurring. Here's an example of that. These are laboratory mice, and everyone's comfortable with the idea that, well, we could test these mice, we could study the insulin in these mice to help us understand human health and diabetes and medical conditions like that. Yep. So that's an approach that's taken in modern biology, combining the DNA sequence information with biochemical and genetic studies. It's called the model organism approach, and laboratory mice are model organisms to help us understand human health. There are other famous model organisms. Fruit flies are a famous model organism. Another model organism is actually the yeast that causes bread to rise. Biologists studying those model organism species, mice, fruit flies, and even that yeast, all have been awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine because of how their studies could be shown to be related to us and our health and disease. By combining biochemical, genetic studies with this tremendous amount of DNA sequence information and a lot of other data, everything points to a history of life on Earth having an evolutionary process that produced the product of life we see today. And studying that pattern is incredibly valuable for us. So the next thing is that we can actually remove one of those hands and we can watch the snake's tail wiggle. What's that mean? And that means that some evolution occurs on a rapid time scale, and we can directly observe it. There are many examples of that, and it would be wrong for anybody to say, oh, I don't believe in evolution, because short-term evolution is a matter-of-fact, cause and effect, physical, common sense story. And here's some examples of those stories. All the breeds of dogs are the result of humans taking advantage of evolutionary change and breeding over the last several centuries. When your doctor admonishes you to make sure you take all the pills in an antibiotic prescription, they're saying that because if you stop short, there's a chance the bacteria could become antibiotic resistant through a process of evolution. Almost all the food we eat is the product of evolutionary change through centuries of breeding plants and animals on farms. Each winter, we face new strains of the flu virus because viruses rapidly evolve. That's a Neanderthal. And now scientists have managed to collect DNA that's tens of thousands of years old, and study some of our recent relatives like Neanderthals. Again, each case being examples of being able to really directly observe evolutionary change and watch the snake's tail wiggle. Now, it's still a theory over hundreds of millions of years because we can't see the snake crawl. We can just see the tail wiggle. But that's tremendously significant evidence of life continuing to evolve on our planet. Okay? The next thing we want to mention is that we can spread the fingers on the final hand covering the snake, because that's where the fossil record fits in. And the fossil record is added to each year and is tremendous data over hundreds of millions of years, pointing to the history of life on Earth involving a process of evolutionary change. Yep. All of that work gets combined together in modern biology. So not just DNA sequence information, not just short evolutionary change, not just fossils, not just biochemistry, not just genetics, not just cell biology. All of it gets combined together and to do modern biological work. And all of it is a pattern of what the relationships are between life on Earth. Here's an example of that. This just shows a range of animal species, ranging from simple sponges to vertebrates, including mammals. And what's shown here next to each species is a long line, and the line represents a stretch of DNA sequence letters from that species. The length of it is tens of thousands of nucleotides long, letters long, so we've really zoomed out. And each of the colored boxes represents a gene, and the computer just easily lined these genes up between the species to show closely related genes in each of the species, the same way we could line up the human insulin gene letters, DNA sequence letters, with other species and their insulin genes. In this example, the genes are a group of genes, a family of genes called Hox genes, and the products of the Hox genes play a role in helping pattern the head to tail axis on the bodies of every animal. It's curious and consistent with evolutionary change that sponges really don't have very many Hox genes, and they don't really look very much like Hox genes. They are very distantly related. Nevertheless, the computer can find and line up proto-Hox genes that were set already in simple early animals like sponges to evolve over time to help organize more complex animal body plans over long periods of time. So just tremendous examples of stories from the pattern. Again, our analogy of the snake is a simple analogy. The pattern of sand is a simple pattern, but remember, it shows the direction the snake was crawling, it shows the size of the snake, it shows the species of the snake. So even a simple pattern like this can show us a lot about the process, even if the snake crawled through in the night. So it's a good analogy. It's just that there's tremendous information in the pattern of life on Earth that points to the process of evolution. Thanks.